Thank you. Did want to note that the first time I ever saw that chimney, I was with Clem Whittle, who had his grazing land out there. And he took me out there and we looked at the chimney and I thought, oh, that must have been a fabulous house. Look at that chimney. And it was about 10 years later in an album at the museum, I saw a photo of the house. So it was not fabulous. Oh, okay. The ranching and agricultural development of the lands in present Greenhorn Creek development have been linked with one family, the Selkirks and their daughters and families from the mid-1850s to the late 1930s, over 80 years. By the late 1840s, David Selkirk, born in New York, and wife, Kentucky-born Perlina King Kaiser, were residing in Wisconsin, where David was working as a lead miner. And to find these photos, we looked when we did all this work back then, we never found any photos of them. And we did a lot of work on Ancestry, but luckily in 2017, a descendant posted all these photos. So that's where we got them. Okay, please. 2 daughters were born to them in Wisconsin, Sarah Jane in 1849 and Mary Virginia, known as Jenny, in 1851. By 1855, David had settled in Calaveras County, and the following year, Perlina and daughters followed, traveling the Panama route. That same year, David took up 160 acres of land for agricultural and grazing purposes on the Smith's Flat Road to Angels Camp. And the Smith's Flat Road went from Smith's Flat, which is down near the Osborne Ranch, and through the Selkirk Ranch and into Angels Camp. There they resided in a log cabin where son James was born that November, only to die 2 years later. Did you, if you look, you put an arrow on there. Thank you. You will see in this 1871 General Land Office plat.
But here's the pointer.
Okay. But you've got there, so you can see where they lived and where the road was. According to an account in the Sacramento Bee in December 1857, the Alta, which was a newspaper, of last evening was informed by a gentleman from Angels, Calaveras County, that on Wednesday last, a man named David Selkirk was probably most fatally injured while attempting to blast a log. The fuse had been fired, and after waiting some little time for it to explode, Selkirk went up to this log, and while his face was directly over the charge, it exploded, blowing out both his eyes, tearing off one side of his face, and literally scalping him. These first-hand accounts are a little graphic. When our informant left on Tuesday morning, he was still alive, though scarcely a hope was entertained that he would survive. The unfortunate man has a wife and 3 children. But survive he did, to father 2 more daughters and found a dynasty that resided on the land until the 1930s. In 1858 and 59, the benevolent citizens, according to the newspaper, of Angels Camp, wait, I should go back there. Yeah, okay. Built them a small house with gable roof, lap siding, and double hung windows. A magnificent stone chimney was built by their friend Alexander Love, a 22-year-old Scotsman who arrived in New York in 1842, noted his occupation as stonecutter. And Alexander Love is, of course, known for the Love Livery Stable in Angels Camp, and later his name on Love Creek for his Love's sawmill up there. But I'll keep it there. But he Then he became a famous lumberman with a large mill on Love Creek. Love, however, evidently continued to practice his first occupation, building not only the Selkirk chimney, but several gate posts around Angels Camp, like these at the Masonic Hall. And if you drive around Angels Camp, you can see some of these in various places. Okay, 2 more daughters were born on the ranch, Alice Emma in 1860 and Clarissa Anna, known as Clara, in 1866. Thereafter, David made his living playing the fiddle at local dances, and Perlina ran the ranch with the assistance of her daughters and son, a Chinese immigrant who came to the ranch as a young boy and remained with the family until his death. In 1870, the farm was assessed at a value of $1,000, and the livestock included 3 horses, 1 mule, 3 milk cows, and 3 head of cattle. Other structures on the ranch included a root cellar, blacksmith shop, and barn. And we just discovered this photograph, so maybe we can put that on our old map. The Selkirks, like many others in the Angels Camp area, made their living by practicing a mixed economy. They planted orchards and a vegetable garden, raised cattle and poultry, plowed and planted fields of hay with horses and mules, and boarded local miners and farm laborers. And this is a Steve Archer map of the way it is presently today with the locations. And please go out there and take a look. There's also a walking tour that starts here. The daughters acquired husbands who added to the family lands, which were combined and used by all family members. After David's death in 1878, the Macaulays and Hinklemans assisted Perlina. The eldest daughter, Sarah Jane, wed local miner Isaac Newton Macaulay in 1867, and they took up 90 acres of land adjoining her parents. And Sarah Jane was evidently friends with everybody in Angels Camp, because if you go to the county archives, there's a whole archival box full of photographs of everybody in Angels Camp with saying, "Dear Janie." Okay, next. This is a map of the ranch, their ranch site, the archaeological map. Next. Daughter Jeannie, the second owner, found 2 husbands amongst her mother's boarders. The picture of her was taken in 1881, and next to it is her first husband, George Lucas, a miner who had spent a little time in San Quentin for robbery, but he after George Lucas died in 1879, she married local miner James Gardner Maltman, and they took up lands in the southeast corner of the subdivision, but they reside on Knob Hill in Angels Camp. This is the Maltman mine in Angels Camp, and her husband then continued to be in charge of the Maltman Mining Company, and they moved to Berkeley for a while before moving back to Stockton area. Okay. Jenny raised 5 children. Hattie Lucas, standing here, the larger girl, born in 1877, and then Carolyn, born in 1884, and William David Maltman, born in 1886, and they're shown here. The children of Maltman, John Maltman, and then Edna Olivine in 1887, and James Gardner Maltman in 1893. Daughter Jen Alice married miner and rancher Charles Hinkleman, and they also resided on the family lands. Okay. Clara, however, broke the mold. She's the one on the left. We don't know who the one on the right is, but just says friend. Clara led a confusing life. According to Ancestry.com, their daughter Lulu Gertrude was born to Clara and John Steele in September 1884, but Clara then married Frank Bates at the Selkirk home in May of 1885. Bates apparently disappears from her life with no divorce mentioned in the documents. Clara then birthed two more children with John Steele, Rita in 1892 and John in 1893. Soon after, she moved to Arcata to live as the wife of William Lester Rogers. No marriages to Steele or Rogers were ever recorded. Thereafter, Lulu was raised by Rogers and took his name. The two younger Steele children were raised by their father in Tulare and then by Clara's sister and her husband, Alice and Charles Hinkleman, in Stockton. In this photo, 7.5-year-old Lulu is standing beside her sister Rita, aged 3.5 months. And next one. In 1892, Perlina and 3 of her daughters and children gathered by the chimney for a photograph. And left to right, and if you can see these people, there's Charles Hinkleman, Alice Hinkleman holding William David Maltman, Sarah Jane McCauley holding Edna Olivine Maltman, Carolyn Perlina Maltman, Perlina Kaiser Selkirk, Hattie Lucas, Jenny Maltman, and a friend, John Hackshaw. And if you know, most every photograph shows this chimney as the focal point. Next. Perlina died in 1900. After her death, the Selkirk house was leased to the Girardi family, who raised beef for sale in Angels Camp. The house burned to the ground in a range fire in the early 1920s, shortly after this photograph was taken. So you can see it's not that magnificent house that the chimney fit the chimney. Okay, next. During the 1880s, the McCauley family maintained a few cows and a fairly large number of goats. By the mid-1890s, they had turned to the dairy business, selling milk and butter in Angels Camp. After the death of Isaac McCauley in 1903, Sarah Jane moved to Stockton, and the dairy business was taken over by their sons, Bert, Will, and Ed. Will and his family moved away in the early 1920s, leaving the dairy operation to the other two brothers, who continued to ride on the farm until the 1930s, when they moved to Stockton. The McCauley house burned in a range fire in the early 1940s, shortly after the property was sold to cattleman Ed Wilson, who used it for grazing. The three eldest Selkirk girls, however, outlived them all, including all the McCauley boys. Sarah Jane dying at age 95 in 1945, Jenny at the age of 102, and Alice at 92, both in 1952, and Clara only lived to be 74, dying in 1940. Maybe the wages of sin. Anyway, here's a newspaper article from the Stockton Record where all the family moved there, the McCauleys, and this was a newspaper article in 1938 celebrating the birthdays of those ladies in their 1880s. And of course, they lived another 20 years. Okay, Julia?
Watch the cables.
So, the most prominent